In a year already overflowing with celebrity courtroom drama and high-profile legal feuds, nothing has stunned the Hollywood elite quite like this Blake Lively. One of the industry's most protected and admired figures just suffered a crushing, very public defeat. Her lawsuit against Jed Wallace, a journalist turned whistleblower known for exposing the inner workings of Hollywood power circles, has been officially dismissed by the court. And make no mistake, this wasn't just a technicality or legal misstep. According to insiders and newly unsealed legal documents, it was a full-scale implosion of Blake's case, an unraveling so swift and undeniable that even her most loyal defenders were caught off guard. This isn't just about one actress losing a legal battle. This is about a celebrity using her status to try to silence someone who poked holes in the perfect image she's spent years curating and losing. What's more, the ruling was definitive. The judge didn't leave the door open for another appeal or request for reconsideration. The judgment stated in plain and powerful language that Jed Wallace's speech was protected under the First Amendment, and Blake Lively failed to prove that any defamation had occurred. Not only were the allegations against Wallace found to be legally insufficient, but the court also criticized the lack of evidence and overreach attempted by Lively's legal team. For fans who've watched Blake Lively climb from TV darling to Hollywood A-lister, this decision cuts deep. But for those who've been following the Wayfarer contract manipulation rumors, the ones Wallace initially brought to public attention, this dismissal feels like vindication. It's a rare moment where the veil lifts and we get a glimpse into how PR machines, legal threats, and media manipulation all collide behind the scenes in elite circles. The fallout from this case could be enormous, not just for Blake's reputation, but also for other celebrities who have relied on legal intimidation to suppress critical voices online. What really happened behind closed doors? How did Lively's legal strategy backfire so spectacularly? And what does this ruling mean for Jed Wallace and other content creators and journalists going forward? Get ready to uncover the full story, because this isn't just a legal loss, it's a cautionary tale. One that has Hollywood insiders whispering, lawyers scrambling, and the internet absolutely exploding with reactions. From sealed depositions to contradictory affidavits, from court orders to unfiltered commentary, we're diving into the courtroom. Chaos that just might redefine the rules of power, speech, and accountability in celebrity culture. This is the takedown nobody expected, and it might just be the beginning. Let's get into it. It was the courtroom shock no one saw coming. Blake Lively, once the darling of red carpets and award shows, is now grappling with a legal defeat that's sending tremors through Hollywood. Her lawsuit against Jed Wallace, a relatively low-profile but strategically influential figure in the entertainment industry, has just been dismissed. And not on a technicality. This wasn't some procedural quirk or a case of wrong jurisdiction. No, this was a full-fledged dismissal with language from the judge that could only be described as blistering. What began as an ambitious lawsuit from Lively intended to send a message to anyone who dared speak out about her alleged involvement in Hollywood controversies has boomeranged back in ways that might permanently tarnish her image. And the worst part for her, this wasn't just a legal loss, it was a very public one. The press was in the gallery, cameras were outside the courthouse, and Jed Wallace, the man Lively hoped to silence, walked out victorious and smiling. So what exactly went wrong for Blake? Why did the judge issue such a scathing opinion? And how did this case, once propped up by some of the most powerful lawyers in the business, end in utter defeat? It all started when Lively filed a defamation lawsuit, accusing Jed Wallace of orchestrating what she called a malicious campaign to damage her reputation. At the heart of the case was a series of podcast episodes, social media commentary, and a behind-the-scenes interview Wallace gave to a prominent entertainment outlet. In these appearances, Wallace questioned Lively's alleged behind-the-scenes behavior during her involvement in the Wayfarer project, a now infamous production linked to Fallout, involving Justin Baldoni and several others. Lively's legal team, led by high-powered attorney Brian Friedman, argued that Wallace had crossed a line, that his comments were knowingly false, reckless, and intended to harm her career. For months, the case moved slowly through the system, with Wallace's legal team pushing back at every step, arguing that his remarks were protected by the First Amendment, grounded in opinion and substantiated by credible sources. But it wasn't just a free speech argument. It was a dismantling of Lively's entire case, point by point. And then, in a move that blindsided many observers, the judge issued a ruling, not just denying Lively's claims but outright dismissing the entire case with prejudice. That means she can't refile it, it's over. The language of the court order was more than just legal formality, it was damning. The judge wrote that Lively had failed to establish a prima facie case of defamation, that the defendant's speech falls squarely within the bounds of protected commentary, and perhaps most devastatingly that the court finds no reasonable jury could conclude that Mr. Wallace's statements rise to the level of actionable defamation. This is where the real unraveling begins. Because this wasn't just about Blake Lively and Jed Wallace. This was about power dynamics in Hollywood. This was about a high-profile celebrity trying to assert control over the narrative and a relatively unknown figure refusing to back down. It's David versus Goliath, but in this version, David doesn't just win. He exposes Goliath's vulnerabilities for the world to see. The media response was swift and brutal. Blake Lively sidelined by the court. One headline read, "Jed Wallace emerges as unexpected hero in Hollywood free speech battle," another proclaimed. For weeks, Lively's PR team had tried to frame the lawsuit as an effort to protect her reputation from lies and harassment. But after the ruling, it became clear that the court didn't agree. And while Lively's team has vowed to explore other legal options, many legal analysts say there's little she can do. The case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning any attempts to refile will likely be dead on arrival. Behind the scenes, sources close to the case describe a growing panic within Lively's inner circle. According to insiders, her advisors are concerned not just about the legal loss but the long-term damage this could do to her brand. The Courtroom defeat is being described internally as a reputational crisis, one that could lead to canceled projects, hesitancy from sponsors, and a reevaluation from studios about whether she's worth the risk. To be clear, Blake Lively is no stranger to controversy. In recent years, her involvement in the Wayfarer fallout alongside other power players like Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni, and Taylor Swift has been the subject of public fascination and internet speculation, but this case against Jed Wallace was supposed to be a turning point. It was meant to show that Lively wasn't just defending herself, she was fighting back. Instead, it became a disaster. As news of the dismissal spreads, reactions from Hollywood have begun trickling in, and they're telling. Some actors and directors who were previously aligned with Lively are now going radio silent. Others are quietly distancing themselves, with a few even removing old posts showing support. There's a chill moving through the industry, one that says maybe it's time to back away. Meanwhile, Jed Wallace is receiving a wave of support online. Hashtags like #JedWins and #BlakeLosesBig are trending. Content creators who previously expressed concern about speaking out are now feeling emboldened, citing the ruling as proof that truth and the right to speak it will prevail. Wallace himself issued a short statement outside the courthouse saying this was never about money or fame, it was about standing up to a pattern of intimidation, and I'm grateful the court saw through it. That one sentence, a pattern of intimidation, has ignited fresh discussions about how Lively and her legal team have handled other controversies. Whispers are growing louder. Other creators are beginning to share their own stories. Quiet messages, cease and desist letters, backdoor warnings from talent agencies, all hinting at a larger strategy of silencing dissent. If these claims gain traction, Lively may soon find herself at the center of an entirely new public reckoning. And so the once unshakable Blake Lively is now navigating the most treacherous PR waters of her career. To truly understand how we got here and why this loss could reshape the way celebrities use the legal system to protect their image, we have to rewind the clock and trace the sequence of events that led to this moment. The Wayfarer fallout, the podcast that started it all, the aggressive cease and desist letters, and the quiet power plays behind the scenes, because this isn't just about a court case. This is about power, truth, and the limits of celebrity control in the age of accountability. To truly understand how Blake Lively's lawsuit unraveled so dramatically, we need to go back to the scandal that started it all, the Wayfarer controversy. At first glance, Wayfarer was supposed to be a groundbreaking film project, a star-studded Hollywood drama led by Justin Baldoni and bolstered by names like Taylor Swift, Ryan Reynolds, and yes, Blake Lively. The production had all the hallmarks of a prestige project: socially conscious storytelling, powerful emotional beats, and a modern narrative that promised to shake up the industry. But as the cameras began rolling and the press junkets kicked off, murmurs behind the scenes began leaking to the surface. There were whispers of manipulation, not just in the production process, but in how talent was being treated and portrayed. According to anonymous sources within the production, decisions were allegedly being made not based on creative merit but on backdoor politics, PR strategy, and favored access that certain celebrities wielded. That's where Jed Wallace entered the picture. A relatively unknown media commentator at the time, Wallace began posting cryptic threads on social media alluding to powerful celebrities, shaping production deals in ways that undermined co-stars and silenced dissenting voices. While he didn't name names initially, the breadcrumbs were clear enough for online sleuths to speculate and eventually identify key figures allegedly involved in the backstage drama. Wallace's reporting gained traction after a viral podcast episode in which he, alongside a legal expert and a Hollywood assistant turned whistleblower, laid out a compelling timeline suggesting that one A-list actress had gone to extreme lengths to protect her image, even if it meant throwing others under the bus. The actress in question, Blake Lively. In that episode, Wallace described internal memos from the Wayfarer production team, transcripts of alleged email exchanges, and summaries of contract clauses that reportedly showed how certain cast members were granted influence over final cuts on set decisions and promotional control. While Wallace never claimed to have direct access to those emails, he stated that multiple sources corroborated their contents and that legal teams had reviewed them before publication. The reaction was seismic. Fans, critics, and journalists dove deep into the theory, combing through press interviews, comparing timelines, and highlighting moments where Lively's public narrative appeared carefully curated. One viral TikTok video even broke down her Wayfarer promo tour, noting how she consistently dominated airtime while other stars like Baldoni were sidelined. It wasn't long before Lively's team snapped into action. Her publicist issued a sharp denial, calling the claims baseless and defamatory, while her legal team sent out cease and desist letters to multiple platforms hosting the episode and commentary. Still, the genie was out of the bottle. Rather than quelling the conversation, Lively's legal moves seemed to validate Wallace's claims in the public eye. If there was no truth to the allegations, why fight so hard to shut them down? Why not simply issue a rebuttal and move on? That question kept circling in the minds of fans and industry insiders alike. But the move that turned the tide against her completely was the lawsuit. Blake Lively filed a formal defamation suit against Jed Wallace in what her team called a necessary step to protect the truth. The complaint accused Wallace of knowingly spreading falsehoods with malicious intent, damaging her career and placing her family under undue stress. On the surface, the lawsuit seemed airtight. It was detailed. It included transcripts, timelines, and even referenced loss of brand deals, all supposedly due to Wallace's commentary. But legal observers spotted a problem almost immediately. Much of the lawsuit's backbone relied on arguing emotional harm and reputational damage, without adequately disproving the actual claims made. That's where Wallace had the advantage. His team had already anticipated a legal challenge and compiled a defense rooted in what's known as the anti-SLAPP doctrine, a legal safeguard meant to prevent powerful figures from weaponizing lawsuits to silence critics. Under California's anti-SLAPP statute, if a defendant can show that their speech was protected commentary on a matter of public interest, the burden shifts to the plaintiff to prove a strong likelihood of success at trial. In this case, Judge Ellen Kingsley determined that Wallace had met that standard. The judge ruled that Wallace's podcast and social media posts fell under protected opinion, especially since he had clearly labeled some of his content as speculation, provided sourcing disclaimers, and most importantly, framed the entire discussion around industry ethics and transparency. In other words, Wallace wasn't saying Blake Lively did this with certainty. He was saying, here's what sources close to the production are alleging, and here's why that matters. And that distinction made all the difference. Lively's team, meanwhile, struggled to present any hard evidence that Wallace's claims were knowingly false. In fact, the court documents showed that several of Wallace's statements were backed up by emails, casting documents, and insider confirmations that his lawyers had collected. That made it nearly impossible for Lively to argue actual malice, the legal threshold for a public figure to prove defamation. Once the dismissal came down, media outlets began revisiting the original Wayfarer controversy with renewed interest. If Lively couldn't disprove the allegations, what did that say about the allegations themselves? Was there merit to the claims that she manipulated edits or downplayed others in the project? And more disturbingly, did the attempted lawsuit reflect a larger pattern of image management that relied on intimidation? As creators and journalists began unpacking these questions, new details surfaced. A former PR consultant speaking under condition of anonymity told one outlet that Lively's team had long operated with a contain and control strategy when it came to media narratives. According to the source, any deviation from the preferred storyline was swiftly addressed with a mix of legal warnings, strategic leaks, and favor trading with journalists. The Wallace lawsuit then wasn't a one-off, it was simply the first to reach a courtroom. Now, with the case dismissed and Wallace effectively vindicated, the Wayfarer controversy has evolved from a niche internet drama into a full-blown Hollywood cautionary tale. Celebrities can no longer rely on legal muscle alone to bury criticism. especially not when the public perceives the lawsuit itself as part of the problem. Blake Lively, once viewed as a relatable and aspirational star, is now being re-examined through a different lens. Her brand, once built on authenticity, elegance, and female empowerment, is now intertwined with themes of image control, legal aggression, and courtroom drama. Meanwhile, Jed Wallace's profile has skyrocketed. Where he was once seen as a background figure with limited influence, he's now being praised as a defender of media freedom. Invitations to speak on larger platforms have rolled in. Creators are citing his victory as a pivotal moment in their fight for transparency in celebrity culture. And behind it all is a growing movement demanding accountability, not just from Lively but from any figure who tries to use influence to dodge public scrutiny. What comes next is unclear. There's speculation that more media figures who were targeted by Lively's team may now come forward with their own stories. There are whispers of possible countersuits or even defamation claims against her, not for speaking her truth but for allegedly using the legal system as a tool of intimidation. If that happens, the Wayfarer fallout won't just be a chapter in her career, it may become the story that defines it. The court's dismissal of Blake Lively's case against Jed Wallace has created ripple effects far beyond a single lawsuit. This wasn't just about one Hollywood star trying to protect her image, it was a pivotal moment in the ongoing clash between celebrity influence and the power of independent media voices. And the final ruling didn't just close a case, it opened a new chapter in how celebrities engage with their critics, the press, and the legal system. For Blake Lively, the public nature of this defeat has been nothing short of a PR disaster. Once praised for her carefully cultivated image and subtle control over her media persona, she now finds herself under an entirely different spotlight, one that highlights miscalculated legal aggression and a stunning lack of evidence. The judge's statement alone, underscoring that Wallace's commentary was protected speech, sends a direct message: just because you're famous doesn't mean you're immune to critique. Observers and media analysts have begun referring to this case as a Hollywood cautionary tale. What began as an attempt by Lively's team to silence dissenting voices and reshape the narrative ended in a courtroom where facts, not fame, carried the day. And while her legal team sought to claim moral high ground, it was Jed Wallace who walked out vindicated, armed with legal precedent and newfound public support. What's perhaps most fascinating is how this case revealed the cracks in the celebrity legal playbook. Time and again, high-profile figures have resorted to strategic litigation, using vague accusations of defamation, emotional distress, or brand harm as weapons against journalists, content creators, and whistleblowers. But this ruling proves those tactics are losing their teeth, especially when the other side is willing to fight back with documentation, clarity, and transparency. Behind closed doors, there are already whispers of concern from other A-listers and their PR advisors. If Blake Lively, with all her resources, couldn't make this case stick, who else might fail next? Entertainment industry thrives on control of stories, narratives, reputations. But Jed Wallace's win signals that public figures might no longer be able to dictate the boundaries of commentary with the same force they once wielded. Legal experts have also chimed in, calling the judge's opinion a landmark defense of First Amendment rights in the digital age. As more commentary shifts from traditional media to independent platforms, YouTube, podcasts, social media, the rules are being rewritten in real time. What used to be considered fringe or amateur content is now at the center of legal debates. And this case puts a spotlight on just how powerful those creators can be. Jed Wallace himself released a short statement after the ruling, thanking his legal team and affirming his commitment to honest, fearless storytelling. He acknowledged the emotional toll the case had taken, but emphasized that it only strengthened his resolve. His supporters have been vocal across platforms, calling this a victory for truth-tellers and a warning to anyone trying to bully the internet into silence. And the irony of it all, the very lawsuit that was supposed to shut Wallace up ended up amplifying his voice tenfold. His subscriber count has surged. His social media engagement has skyrocketed. Even mainstream outlets that previously stayed neutral are now analyzing the case in his favor. Lively's lawsuit, intended to shut down criticism, ended up magnifying it exponentially. For Blake, the road ahead looks far more uncertain. Public perception has shifted. Commentators are asking tough questions. Why was this lawsuit filed without clear evidence? Why attempt to control a narrative if there was nothing to hide? What does this say about the power dynamics at play behind the curtain of Hollywood's most polished players? Even fellow celebrities have begun to distance themselves subtly. While no one has outright condemned her actions, there's been a noticeable absence of public support. No statements from her close circle, no rallying of allies, no impassioned defenses. Just silence, deafening silence from those who usually rush to back one of their own. That's because this case didn't just involve a disagreement, it exposed a mindset. A belief that power, prestige, and money could dictate truth. That criticism could be erased by legal threats. That public image was more important than public accountability, and in today's climate, that kind of thinking feels increasingly outdated. And let's not forget the broader impact on the media landscape. This ruling may discourage celebrities from using the legal system to silence legitimate criticism. At the same time, it emboldens independent creators to stand firm, knowing the courts may now offer them more protection than ever before. We are witnessing a recalibration of media power, one where platforms and personalities once considered small are now winning battles against the biggest names in the world. But while Jed Wallace celebrates his courtroom victory, there's also a cautionary element to this story. Legal wins don't erase the emotional strain, the financial burden, or the months spent under the threat of serious legal consequences. Many content creators still can't afford to fight back the way Wallace did. This case is an exception, but it sets a new precedent for those who dare to try. In the end, Blake Lively's humiliating loss isn't just a headline, it's a turning point. It's a warning to the industry that times are changing, that speech matters, and that the public is no longer blindly siding with celebrity over substance. It reminds everyone that truth, when backed by facts, can survive even the fiercest attempts to suppress it. What remains to be seen is how Lively herself will respond. Will she retreat from the public eye, issue a statement of contrition, or double down and pursue a different strategy? Whatever comes next, it's clear she'll be operating in a far different environment, one shaped by her very public defeat. This case will be studied, debated, and cited for years. It's more than just a loss in court, it's a moment of reckoning for Hollywood itself. The balance of power is shifting, and for those who've built their empires on controlling the narrative, the message is clear: the era of unchecked celebrity control is coming to an end.